relative clause is, we're going to go over head subject of relative clause, head object of relative, okay, never mind. Relative clause. A relative clause is a way of modifying, okay, let's do that again. A relative clause is a way of, oh my God, start over again. A relative clause is a way of modifying a noun with a sentence. Let's make this clear with an example. Take the two sentences, you saw the man and the man went. We can use the second sentence to modify the noun man in the first by combining the two sentences. You saw the man that went. Here, that went is a relative clause. The relative clause in you saw the man that went modifies the noun man. We call the noun that is modified the head of the relative clause. It is possible to have both subjects and objects in the relative clause. For example, we can combine you saw the man with I saw the man to get you saw the man that I saw. Where is the relative clause in the sentence? What is ahead of the relative clause here? The relative clause in that I saw, the relative clause is that I saw. The head is again the noun man. Notice that the object of the sentence, I saw the man, disappear when it combines with you saw the man to become a relative clause. For another example, combine you saw the man that, for another example, combine you saw the man with the man saw me. This time you get you saw the man that saw me. This time it's the subject of the relative clause that disappears. So if you study these patterns, you saw the man that went, man is head, that went would be your relative clause. The basic relative clauses covered in this section, the basic relative clauses covered in this video are those that are introduced in English with a word like that, as an example shown here, or who, as in the man who I saw, or which, as in the canoe which I saw. As it happens, column is somewhat similar to English in ways it forms these, As it happens, column is somewhat similar to English in ways it forms these set, oh my God, why can't I read? As it happens, column is somewhat similar to English in the way it forms these types of basic relative clauses. There are, however, other types of relative clauses in English, such as the place where I live or the reason why I left. The transitions to these are formed very differently in column.
You saw the man that I saw. You saw the man that you saw. And you saw the man that we saw. You saw the man that he saw.
Look at the first model. Here, the relative clause is intransitive. The two sentences that are combined are you saw him, and hiatsa, the man went. Notice, just as in English, the head always precedes the relative clause. Column differs from English in that there are no relative pronouns like that, or who, or which. The verb of the relative clause immediately follows the head of the noun. Now look at the other four models. In these, the relative clause is transitive. Each has regular object suffix. Now if you need to review, what's 7? Now, if you need to go back, go ahead and review the object pronouns in lesson 7.2. and that's on the non-control object suffixes. The pattern for these last four models is really the same as the pattern for these last four models is really the same as that seen in the first model. The verb of the relative clause immediately follows the head of the noun. The first word in each of the models is the main verb of the sentence. In each of those models, the main verb is transitive. What are the subject and direct object in these models? Okay, wait. What are the subject and direct object in each of these models? The main verb in each of the models is kwanu, and its subject is you. The object of the main verb in the first model is sa swaika hia, the man that went. The object of the verb in each of these sentences is the head noun with its modifying relative clause. Ooh. Okay. It is possible to have a relative clause in the subject of the main verb only if the main verb is intransitive. Hiatsa swaika kwanunga, the man that saw me went. In this sentence, the main verb is hia, go, an intransitive verb. Its subject is sa swaika kwanunga. Okay. Its subject is sa swaika kwanunga, the man that saw me. In English, it is common to have a relative clause in the subject of a transitive main verb. For example, the man that saw me. Okay. For example, the man that went. For example, the man that went saw me. The main verb of this English sentence saw, and its subject is the man that went. The main verb of this English sentence saw, and its subject is the man that went. The only way to express an idea like the man that went saw me in English is with a passive. Kwanang tsena sa swaika hia. I was seen by the man that went. Let me do that again. The only way to express an idea like the man that went saw me in Klalam is with a passive. So it'd be Kwanang tsena sa swaika hia. I was seen by the man that went. As this last example shows, it's possible to have a relative clause in the object of a preposition. In this example, atsa swaika hia, by the man that went, is a prepositional phrase containing the relative clause hia modifying the head of the noun swaika. I'll do that again. In the example, atsa swaika hia, by the man that went, is a prepositional phrase containing the relative clause hia modifying the head noun swaika. And one new vocabulary word. Let's pause. A new vocabulary word. At. Write something.
Cheat ut sa sway was quet. Niche ut sa sway was macrum.
And here is the model for head object of relative clause.
You saw the man that I saw.
Cuando estás cerca, cuando estás cerca, cuando
You saw the man that you saw.
estás cerca, cuando estás cerca, cuando
And you saw the man that we saw.
estás cerca, cuando estás cerca, cuando
You saw the man that he saw.
estás cerca, cuando estás cerca, cuando
Compare this set of model with the models with the previous, okay. Compare this set of models with the previous models. Looking first at the English translations, notice that the relative clause in these models have objects, I, you, and so on. The relative clause in the models the relative clauses in the previous model had objects, me, you, and so on. Now, look at the column. Notice that where the models in the previous model had object suffixes in relative clauses, these models have a subordinate subject suffixes. Okay, these models have the subordinate subject suffixes. In these models, the head of the object of the relative clause. In these models, the head is the object of the relative clause. Other than that, and the subordinate subject suffixes, the structure is the same as the previous section. The head comes before the relative clause. A very common use of relative clause is a pattern that a very common use of the relative clause is any pattern that is usually called a cleft construction. So if you compare, I use my paddle, chooks, since na hotnet and nifza na hotnet chooks. Oh my goodness, I'm saying it wrong. Chook. Chooks since na hotnet. Chooks since nhot. Chooks since nhotnet. Chooks since nhotnet. And nifza nhotnet chookwen. The second example is what's called a cleft sentence. In English, these types of cleft sentences begin with it. In column, they begin with niche. Cleft sentences are used when you want to focus the listener's attention to the object rather than the action.
She ut kusag ani yuiten manu I nishutak ani queen ISU.
And to headless relative clauses.
You saw the man that I saw.
Quando das way quando das way quando
You saw the man that you saw.
quando das way
You saw what I saw.
quando da quando quando
I saw what you saw.
quando
You saw what we saw.
quando
You saw what he saw.
If you compare these set of models to the previous one, you're going to notice that these are just like the models in your previous. If you compare these set of models with the previous, models, you're going to notice that these are just like those models without the head nouns. These are called the headless relative clause because the head is unstated. In English, there are various ways of translating these. The first model can be translated, you saw that which I saw, or you saw the one I saw, as well as you saw what I saw. These are fairly common in Clallam, and note that just as with the other relative clause, these headless relative clauses can be the subject of an intransitive verb or the object of a transitive verb or the object of the preposition. These cannot be the subject of the transitive verb. These cannot be the subject of a transitive verb. Ugh. Oh, dude, again. These are called the headless relative clauses because the head is unstated. In English, there are various ways of translating these. The first model could be translated, you saw that which I saw, or you saw the one I saw, as well as you saw what I saw. These are fairly common in Clallam, and note again that just with, These are fairly common in Clallam. Note again that just as with the other relative clauses, these headless relative clauses can be the subject of an intransitive verb or the object of a transitive verb or the object of the preposition. These cannot be the subject of a transitive verb. The heck?
cheated sa kuan house down. Anak sen cicak ay kam. No, edge that.
All right.